I am originally from Northern Ireland, but I lived in Edinburgh in Scotland for 6 years before coming over to Montreal in Quebec. And I arrived in January 2017, but I spent quite a bit going back and forward between Scotland and Ireland and Quebec for the first few months. And I really so I tend to say I kind of properly arrived in October 2017. And obviously I'm an English language speaker. My background is as a poet and a performer and a workshop facilitator and events host. And that's what I was making my living doing in Scotland for full time for certainly the last 2.5 years before coming over, which is amazing because it's not often you can actually get to do that. And it was a mixture of residencies and projects. So I was really curious about the literary scene over here. I was curious about poetry. I was curious about performance. I was just curious about this completely different context. And so in terms of Atwater Library, I am getting to the point, trust me, there's just a long story around it. But what happened was I got over in October 2017, needed a job, realised being a not particularly fluent French speaker in Quebec makes it really difficult to find work. And then really weirdly, a job came up with the Quebec Writers Federation, who have their offices in Atwater Library in the top floor. So there's sort of it's really nice because it's QWF, which is the Organisation for English Language Writers, and then ALAC, which is the Association of English Language Publishers, and they share an office. So there's this little English language literary hub in the top of the library. And so that's embedded in the library and what the library is known as. And trial and error, but eventually I ended up getting the job as membership services and communications coordinator for Quebec Writers Federation, which meant I actually worked in Atwater Library full time for 2 years. I come from Edinburgh and I come from Scotland, which is very full of very old, beautiful buildings. And there aren't many of them in Montreal, in all honesty, that you might go to work to. And so the fact that I was able to go into what is I think it's a genuinely beautiful building, just the setup with the light and the solidity of it and, where it's situated and all the rest, was a really solid base to come to every day in a lot of ways. And it was quite a refuge, actually, when I was here and I was still getting used to being in a completely different climate, trying to exist half in a different language, becoming a stepmother, a lot of changes, a lot of really emotional changes, actually. I mean, it was really hard, as I'm sure you know it is, to move here or anywhere. And so there's actually quite an emotional attachment I have to the library because it was a second home, it was sort of where I could come and work, and I knew how it worked and I knew the staff. So I was leaving QWF in November, but I got invited to take on the Atwater Poetry Project, which has run in the library for 15 years with various different curators. It was started by an amazing poet over here called Owana Vilisikoi, who is this a stunning poet, performer, translator, and it's there's been about 5, I think, different poet curators who've done it. So I took that over in November 2019, just before I left QWF. I'm still the curator, but obviously we haven't actually been able to be in the library. I think I managed 2.5 shows in the library, and then it was the pandemic and it was lockdown. But it means I still sort of have a connection to the building with the project, and then also when it opens up again, how we'll go back and use that space. I go through phases of sort of reading quite intensively in one area for a bit and then intensively in another. My undergraduate was English literature, and quite a traditional in England English literature course. So I've always read a lot. And I think I've still got that slight university habit of if I'm going to read one book in this area, I should read a few around this area, So when I came, I read a lot of poetry because partly it's my job, in all honesty, to do that. And my friends are poets and they're always bringing books out, and it's very polite to go and buy their books and then read their books and then talk to them about their books. So, I obviously read poetry for pleasure as well, but there is this element of I'm reading this because I need to read this. I need to keep up on what's happening. I need to see I've read a lot more novels over the pandemic than I've read for a really long time. And actually part of that was going back to the library, because unless you're getting sort of good secondhand books, and also those can be quite difficult to come by in English here, like affordable secondhand books. Like, so in Scotland or England, like you'd go to a charity shop and come out with like 5 different books for under £10 or something, you know what I mean? But actually here, like isn't that culture of like charity shops, or like there's Renaissance Chenon, but not many of the books are in English. So getting affordable novels where you're not buying them new, and buying novels new, I'll buy poetry new and I'll buy nonfiction new, but I only read a novel once really. So I'm always get like, why am I spending $25 on this? Apart from it's very beautiful and it's a very beautiful object, but I'm always like, you know. So actually going back to the library and realizing that Kim has amazing taste, and the fiction section in English is incredible. It really is at Atwater Library. And the library's got this amazing Scottish collection. And actually there are people that I knew in Scotland. So it's really with like friends coming in. We're like, oh, Denise Mine has got a new one out. That's good. Trying to read a lot of Canadian and Quebec literature, in honesty. And I'm still doing that because I'm trying to understand this place. I'm trying to understand this country. I'm trying to understand the wider country at a time when it seems to be in a period of great flux and great self-reflection, which is really interesting. But it's quite strange when, like, I don't know how you read, but to read to try and understand the place. But a lot of the stuff that you're reading is kind of being rejected as being passé, or, you know, the whole canon and like, you know, Margaret Atwood and survival and Susanna Moody and, you know, stuff that goes way back, and people are like, no, we don't talk about that anymore. And it's like, well, I haven't read that to start with, so I need to go and read that so I can then reject it and then read the new stuff. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I feel like I'm playing catch up quite a lot of the time as well. I've just reread The Mintage by Will McClelland. He's a Montreal writer. I think this is his only book. I think it took him a really long time to write it. And when you read it, you know why. I picked it up by accident. It was in the KWF office, and it was in like those shelves where you can kind of take books. I read it quite early coming to Quebec. And I've read it I reread it every year. I don't know how to describe the plot. So it's like a slightly futuristic Canada. There is a giant eco-terrorist moose that is like running around the place trying to foment rebellion of the animals against money, basically, in Canada. And like the animals are all rioting and it's all crazy. And then like the Mint is like the place where they make the money in Ottawa, but it's like also a prison for the animals who are on the Mint. And like, it's really weird. And the whole thing is told through a series of letters and like newspaper articles. So it's like a story style of like a kind of this follower who joins the moose and is like hearing his story. And the moose's partner, girlfriend, is human, but also thinks she's a robot. And the elk are all robots and they're fighting the Mounties. It's really bloody, it's the weirdest, excuse my French, fucking thing you've ever read. And I love it with burning passion. It's just the most crazily imaginative, dystopian criticism, like proper, like he's really thought about like the socio-political criticisms of Canada and how Canada were founded, but it's batshit. It's so weird and I love it so much. So that is my favorite book. And it's like every year I get it out and I'm like, I'm going to tell people about this book again. If one more person reads it, that's going to be good. Love it. Love it. I keep an eye out in reviews. I'll read the Montreal Review of Books. There's certain libraries like John and Courtly that, you know, I'll sort of keep an eye on what their recommended new reads are. I'll often maybe look at stuff coming in there and then go and find it in the library if I can. I mean, I think that's, again, you know, pandemic has kind of killed the browsing habit. Like we haven't really been able to go and spend like 2 hours in a bookshop pulling down books and looking at blurbs and being like, oh yeah, maybe I'll try this and maybe I'll try that and blah, blah, blah. As I say, there's, you know, I have this, we actually did start it as a book group during the pandemic with my 3 friends, oldest school friends here in Northern Ireland still. And it was the Transatlantic Bitches Book Club is what we called them. We were doing a lot on recommendations there. And then actually what we did for Christmas, which just turned out to be lovely was we picked one of our favourite books of the last couple of years, and we bought all the others a copy of the book and sent it to them. So we had 3 books each, but we were all reading them kind of at the same time. And I really enjoyed that, actually. That's been a really nice connection. So yeah, just a mixture of stuff like that, in all honesty. Keeping an eye out for authors I'm interested in and if they've got new things coming out. But yeah, definitely not YouTube channels. Instagram, actually, book Instagram is its own private subculture, I think. And there's some people, Heather O'Neill, the author, she and her daughter run an account where they literally just recommend a new book every month. And Helen Shai Bradley, it's a crocodile who works in Run Quarterly, she'll do recommendations as well. And these are people whose opinions you trust. You're like, okay, if they think this is good, I'm going to keep an eye out for this. The Montreal Review of Books is excellent as well, because I've written for them a bit, and also because I was in the office, because they also got produced by ALAC, so there was all part of this same office at Atwater Library, this little hub. But every book gets sent to them that's getting published in Quebec, and they really take the reviewing process seriously and trying to make sure they're covering as much as possible. And it's a print it's online, but it's a print publication as well, which is really lovely still to have. And I think they're a really solid source of info about what's new and what's worth reading at the minute. The one that I read that really blew me away was, and I'm going to get the pronunciation wrong, Akwayeke Emetsi, The Death of Vivek Autry, which was actually a recommendation from Kim. We were just chatting about the books, and I had a whole selection of other stuff, and she literally pulled it down. She's like, have you read this? She said, you need to read this, and pressed it into my hand, scanned it out, and then said, away you go. This was a beautiful book. The author is better known for another book called Freshwater, I think. And they're a non-binary, I think, trans writer from Nigeria, which I didn't actually know before starting. But the book, it's just beautiful. For a start, the prose style is phenomenally good. Like, it's one of those ones where you're just reading it going, oh my God, this is so crafted. These sentences are things of beauty. This is stunning. It's the story of the death of the title character, but it's how that character's life unfolds when they're queer in Nigeria, and there's sort of a mystery in it as well, and because it starts with the body, but then they have, the whole book is how they die. It's just really clever, I just thought it was beautifully conceived. It's a real it's what I would have said was a very Nigerian voice. It speaks of Nigeria, and I think it's writing primarily actually for a Nigerian audience. It's not feeling the need to explain everything Western audiences or English audiences or European audiences. It's okay, I'm going to write about the food, I'm going to write about the country, I'm going to put in words and terms here, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, you're going to figure this out from the context of the book, because it's that beautifully written. But it's not I would have said it's very embedded in place and in where it is, and I think it's beautiful for that as well. And it's also just got an amazing narrative. Like there's this suspense and this tension set up and sustained the whole way through. It's very beautiful, very beautiful. In terms of the mintage, I think it gave me faith that there were people who were writing imaginatively and critically and quite mischievously about Canada. And I had struggled to find that tone. It's a tone I really respond to in a way, and I'd struggled to find it, in honesty, in the books over here. I found that, they were, particularly in English, there's a lot of immigrant stories. There's a lot of people who are telling the stories of their parents who've come over or their grandparents who've come over. And that's beautiful as a genre, but it's very looking back to the past. And so this, because it was so future looking and imaginative, it really gave me faith, I think, to do that. And I think it also just made me think it's a way of criticizing, let's say, colonial structures in Canada that it's symbolic. There's a lot of symbolism in the book, and it's symbolism he's created. He's made his own mythology out of this. And I just... I think the book excited me so much because that was the sort of thing that I wanted to read, and I was struggling to find over here. And in terms of the Emetsi, I think the reasons that I said about it being so embedded in place without feeling the need to explain that overly and just be confident in that voice of going, this is a Nigerian book with a Nigerian voice and a Nigerian locale, and it's up to you to get to grips with that. And I think that's also really inspiring, actually. Yeah.